we're live. Start talking. There we go. All right. So we are all set. Again, thank you, Zach, for being here. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope everyone is doing well and have been applying, and hopefully you guys have some interviews lined up. You finished and finalized your blog post and all that good stuff. But without further ado, we have Zach here. Zach has been a tremendous help for our alum. He's currently a data scientist at unsupervised. It's unsupervised, right? Okay. At unsupervising. He also was a former TA at the boot camp as well. So he does great presentations, as he mentioned earlier, unless you just came in. He usually do these presentations quarterly. There was one point he was doing them like weekly for me, or like once a month. But we've been doing this quarterly to help you guys with the post-bootcamp study plan, and also help you during the interview, and him give you some inside points that I think are really, really helpful when you guys interview. So I'm going to pass the floor over to Zach. Zach, I also have the Dropbox link. I'm going to drop it in the chat. Just let me know whenever you're ready for me to drop it in the chat. But without further ado, Zach.
Awesome, will do. Thank you, Courtney, for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen real quick and we will get started. And I think that button does it. Awesome. So welcome, everybody. Thank you again, Courtney, for the introduction. This is your alumni check-in, but also going to be part one of a two-part series that is a live coding interview workshop. My name is Zach. As Courtney said, I'm an alumni of the bootcamp, graduated June 2020, and currently working as a data scientist at an analytics startup called Unsupervised. So like I said, we're going to be talking about live coding interviews. And I know from experience in my job search process, did a lot of live coding interviews in SQL and in Python. In my current role, I conduct the interviews for candidates trying to come in. So I've seen firsthand in multiple different ways that these live coding interviews are often the most nerve-wracking part of the data interview process. And I'd say for good reason. It's a bit of a strange experience to have someone sitting there watching you code, watching you solve a puzzle. But from what I've also seen is the candidates that are the most successful in these live coding interviews are really just the ones that are most comfortable. And for me, being comfortable comes from two things. One is having some strategies, kind of knowing what to expect and having some strategies to fall back on. And two, practice. Practice, practice, practice. So that is exactly what we're going to do in these workshops. Like I said, two-part series. We'll be meeting again next week to go in more detail. Today's workshop is going to be focused more on what to expect from these live coding interviews, how they're really conducted. And then next week is going to be more deeper into the tips and the strategies, what really makes a successful interview, how to be fully prepared for it. Now, in each of these workshops, there's going to be two components. One is a bit of a lecture sort of period where I talk about my experience and answer any questions that you have, but then also actual practice component. So I've put together a bunch of mock coding challenges. I say mock, but not really. They are almost directly taken from coding challenges that I've done in actual interviews. And we'll be giving those to you to practice on during the workshop in groups so that you could practice like having someone watch you code and work through these problems. So that's the agenda. Before we get into it, I just kind of want to take a quick poll. I know y'all are very early in your process. You're just getting through the post-bootcamp study plan. Has anyone had a live coding interview or has one coming up, perhaps? I would take that to mean that most people haven't. Oh, Joy Deep has one possibly. Is that one coming up in the future, or one that's happened already?
No. So basically, there'll be problem solving case study as a first round, and then second round will be technical skills, and another one might just be a take home exam.
Nice, nice. Cool. So it sounds like the technical one will be more of like the live coding sort of interview. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. So that's coming up. Hopefully this will be helpful for that if that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. I would also take that to mean that most people haven't actually done one of these yet. So again, hopefully this will be helpful for everyone who's kind of just getting into the application process and just starting on the interview process. So with all that said, let's jump in. Like I said, this component is going to be about what to expect in these live coding interviews. I remember the first couple that I did, it was weird enough just to wrap your head around what was going on, let alone actually solving a problem while someone watches you solve a problem. So let's set the stage a little bit about what to expect. SQL or Python/R. Those are really the two, like the languages that you'll likely be tested in. So there's similarities and differences between a SQL test and a Python/R test. First thing, some similarities is both a SQL or a Python/R test can be conducted in a live coding environment or some sort of text file. What do I mean by live coding environment? It's a place where you can actually type code, run it, and see an output or see error messages if there's errors in the code. This can either be something like Coderpad, which is kind of like a Google document for coding, a live environment that multiple people can log into and see. And I'll actually take you on a quick demo of Coderpad later today. Or something like open up a Jupyter notebook, share your screen, and that's what we're going to use. So that's a live coding environment. And these ones, it's really going to be about getting the syntax right. If you run the code and there's errors, you're going to want to be able to fix those errors. But on the other hand, this really threw me off the first couple times I saw it. Your test can be administered just in a text file. I've had many SQL tests where they literally send me a Google document and type the question into a Google Doc, and I sit there and type SQL code into a Google Doc. And the interviewer is just watching me type this code that obviously can't be run. It's a Google Doc. You're never going to see if there's errors. So you can imagine these tests are more about just kind of getting a feel for if you are comfortable with coding, if you can solve some problems, if you can like type out a solution without having to check your work every single step of the way. Less about getting perfect syntax, right? You're never going to be able to see if there's a comma out of place and have to go and debug that. So just to set the stage, those are kind of the similarities, how the test can be administered, both of those for SQL and Python/R. From there, it starts to diverge a little bit. Talking about SQL first, in every single SQL test that I've ever been a part of, and I imagine like it'd be tough to get out of this box, a SQL test is going to be a list of analytical questions that you have to answer by writing some sort of query. And these queries will be run off of relatively simple data sets that are either, again, live, like in some sort of environment where you can actually run, or kind of made up and hypothetical. So it'll be things like, here's the sales table and the customers table. And the questions will be, who was our most valuable customer? Write a query to answer that question. How much did we sell in each department in January? Write a query to answer that question. That is pretty much every SQL test I've ever done. They obviously can get a lot more complicated, but it's all along that theme. On the other hand, Python or R, much more variety here, much wider variety of problems. Of course, those languages can be used for all kinds of things, from data science to building software applications. So you can get a really wide variety of things in Python or R. I'd say the most common is some sort of puzzle to solve. We call these the algorithm questions. where they'll give you some puzzle and say, write a function that solves this puzzle. Something like write a function that deduplicates a list. And then your job is to think through how you might do that, put it into a function, and then maybe test it a couple times to make sure it works. That's probably the most common. You can practice that a lot with things like Code Wars, HackerRank, LeetCode, all of those sorts of sites. But again, wide variety because it's a pretty versatile language, both Python and R. I've had tests where they send you a CSV, ask you to open up a Jupyter notebook, and you go through a data manipulation exercise or a data cleaning exercise. I've had tests where they send you a CSV and they want you to build a simple machine learning pipeline in a Jupyter notebook using that data. So it could be a wide variety. My main tip here is that you can always ask what to expect. If you're about to get into a Python test, you can say, hey, what can I expect from this? Is it going to be more of an algorithm question or a data manipulation exercise? And they most likely will give you some sort of hint so that you can practice a little bit and be more prepared. So that's it for what to expect. I want to pause here, see if anyone has any questions or comments on just like this level setting part of the presentation.
Is it like, are you allowed to Google anything while you're taking these kinds of tests, or it should all be from memory?
Yes, definitely you can. And you will hear me say that a couple more times throughout our next 2 weeks together. 100% you can use resources. And this is something that you might say to your interviewer, hey, I don't really quite remember the syntax for a Windows function. I know that's what I need to use here, but I don't remember the perfect syntax. Do you mind if I Google it real quick? They'll say yes, you'll Google it, you'll get your answer, you'll put it into the solution and everyone will be happy. In my day-to-day work as a data person, I Google things every single day. Right. So it would be really unfair for me to sit here and say, no, you can't Google anything. You have to work in this unrealistic way.
Right.
So I've never seen that in an interview where they say you can't use resources. I'd be pretty upset if they told me that. It seems really unfair to me. So I would operate under the assumption that you'll be allowed, just communicate about it.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, of course, great question.
How often are there coding challenges? Because I thought that, like, I know they changed the curriculum of the boot camp to focus more on Python, because that's what's more in widespread use. I'm just wondering how common it is to get an R coding challenge.
Yeah, I'd say that's right on track. Python is in industry much more widely used. I've never actually done a test in R. It's always either been, this is going to be a Python test or a test that you can do in any scripting language that you feel comfortable with. So in that scenario, if I felt more comfortable with R, I can say, okay, for this, I'm going to use R. But I've personally never done that because I've always felt more comfortable in Python. And I think the assumption is that Python is going to be more popular. And I think the boot camp's in the right direction for sure to focus more on Python. But I just kind of put R in there because there's a chance that if someone here feels more comfortable in R, you might get a test where they say, use whatever you feel most comfortable with, and then you could have the choice.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions or comments from this section? Great. So then, like I said, I kind of wanted to do a little tour of Coderpad, which is the Google Doc with an actual live environment. Coderpad is a very popular sort of interview tool, and I think you'll see why once I jump in. And I'll put this link in the chat as well, if so everyone can kind of see what this is all about. So Coderpad, this is their sandbox version. They have a anyone can access this at any time. But how this will work is in a live coding interview, you'll get into the interview and the interviewer will send you a link to Coderpad, their own personal link. And then it's a private environment that they can see and you can see, they can type into, you can type into it. When someone clicks run, everyone will see what's going on. So this isn't the only way. Like I said, you could also have a Jupyter notebook that you share your screen, or you could have a .txt file, or you could do a Google Doc. There's all sorts of options, but this one is one that's come up a couple times. So I kind of wanted to give you a little tour of what's going on here. So in the middle, if you click on Java, it will open up a whole list of languages. We can click on MySQL. And just to give you an idea of what's going on here, this is a live SQL environment. Right here, you see a schema of 4 tables: employees, projects, departments, and employees, projects. And these are small, but real data tables. So down here, you see they have a little sample query where we're going to select these fields from employees joined on departments, and you can run it and actually get an output. So how this might work is you'll come here and the interviewer might say something like, how many employees do we have? They'll just type this straight into the environment. And you'll say, okay, I think I know how to do that. I could say select count star from employees and click run. You get 6. There we go. There's your answer. And again, a SQL test will be a list of questions. It'll usually start easy like this and get much, much more difficult progressively. So this is just an idea of how it might run, how it might go. If we go over to Python, you can see this is kind of the same deal in a Python environment now. We have a little function printed out, and I'll actually type something in here. Just to give you an example, they'll put in a question and you'll start typing your answer. I kind of want to show you what what an error might look like. So if we set a variable x equals 1 and then add a string, this is obviously going to give us an error and you'd have to debug it. So this is an environment. This is a live environment, similar to a Jupyter notebook, similar to something that you've used a lot in the past. Just want to kind of introduce you to how it is going to look when someone sends you a Coderpad link. And it's actually, I noticed their environments have gotten better than they were in the past. This actually gives you a little hint. It underlines it and gives you a hint of what the error might be while you're typing. So that didn't used to be like that in the past. They're actually getting better, which is cool. Let's actually just, yeah. So it's a live environment. It works as expected. But again, this can be kind of funky if you come to it for the first time in a live coding environment when you're actually being tested and a little nervous already. So hopefully this helps give you an idea of what it looks like and how it might behave. One more thing to say about MySQL. Your coding challenge that you're going to get to in maybe 5 or 10 minutes today is through Coderpad in this sandbox with this exact schema. So I'll have a bunch of questions and you'll actually go to Coderpad and use this live data in order to answer those questions. Funny, interesting note here, when a company buys Coderpad to conduct their interviews, they can input their own data, or they can use this preloaded kind of default data. So I have actually had interviews, live real interviews, that use this exact schema here. You can come to the Coderpad sandbox and practice SQL queries on this data whenever you want. You can get very familiar with this data. It's what we're going to be using today to practice. And I'm not going to sit here and say that 100% certain you're going to see this data in a live coding interview, but there's a chance, and not necessarily a bad chance. So, this is a really valuable data set to practice on. It might be the same data set you actually use. Just a quick side note. So before we move on, any questions about Coderpad or this kind of like interview setup environment? Awesome, awesome, awesome. Then I'm going to go back to our presentation here. And like I said, next week, we're going to be talking a lot more about the strategies for live coding interviews, what works well, what to avoid, those kinds of things. I kind of want to preview that with 3 strategies that I think are the most important, and then we'll get much, much deeper next week. But for today, just 3 tips. Number 1, take your time. It's very easy to come into these interviews, be a little nervous, be on edge, rush right into things, start making mistakes because you rushed right into things. Breathe, take your time, think about your solutions, and just code as if nobody's watching. All right, that's the number 1 thing. That for me makes me the most comfortable, is just taking my time with it. Number 2 was Carolyn's question, kind of previewing, like I said, something that we're going to talk about a bit. Use your resources. In my day-to-day life as a data person, I use Google and Stack Overflow all of the time. So it's pretty unrealistic for someone to say, no, you can't in a live coding interview. I've always been allowed to, and I would expect that to be true. So know that, yeah, you can't, like if the question is write a function that deduplicates a list, I wouldn't go to Google and say how to deduplicate a list. But it's more for like syntax things and small little pieces of your larger solution that you can definitely use your resources, use Google, use Stack Overflow, even a cheat sheet if you have it, that might be okay. And use what you can to get to the solution. And then finally, find the communication balance. We're going to talk about this a lot more next week, but the main idea is you don't want to be talking through every single thing that you type. That is not a recipe for success. It's going to distract you way too much. So you don't want to be talking while you're coding, but not perfectly silent either. These interviews are often a chance to show business context, show that you can think about a problem larger than just code to solve a problem. You can think about, you can ask good follow-up questions. You kind of can picture how an analysis will be interpreted and explain that sort of thing. So it's not talking literally the entire time, but taking opportunities to talk a little bit and show that you can communicate about your code as well. Again, we'll talk about that a lot more next week. But for today, we're about ready to get into practice. So any questions on these before we jump into the practice session of today's, or the practice part of today's workshop? Awesome. So for today's practice problem, right on time, I believe that is the Dropbox link. Thank you, Courtney. We've got this down at this point. We've got this right when we get to the slide, the Dropbox link comes in. This is a well-oiled machine. So in that Dropbox link, you will see some SQL and Python question files. What I would like is for you to please work on SQL today. The reason is we are going to put you into breakout rooms and have you actually practice with a partner. And we want you to treat this like a real live coding interview. So share your screen, go 1 for 1. So one person takes question 1, then the next person takes question 2, then the other person takes question 3, and so forth. And this is to get comfortable with solving these problems with another person in the room. Again, that's one of the most nerve-wracking parts of the live coding interview process, is solving a problem while someone's watching you solve the problem. You'll have all the time in the world to finish what you don't finish today, practice the Python later on, do all kinds of other practice on your own, but please take advantage of this moment where you'll actually be in the room with another person and practice like it's an actual live coding interview. So we'll work on SQL. And like I said, it'll use the Coderpad sandbox. So before we put you into breakout rooms, everyone please download that SQL file, go into the Coderpad sandbox, and I'll give you like 15, 20 seconds here to try that. And please let me know if any of that is not working on your end, either the Coderpad sandbox or being able to open up the SQL file. Awesome. So I assume by the silence, that means everyone is all ready to go here. I will make breakout rooms. Actually, Courtney, can you make me host so I can make breakout rooms here?
Thank you. Yes, let me. All right, your host.
Awesome, thank you. And I see that Chad asked for the link, but then got it from Tam. Teamwork, everybody, well done. Okay, I'm gonna make breakout rooms here. Give me one moment, please. Perfect. So I'm about to open up the rooms. Again, please share your screen. Take it one by one. One person answers question one, the other person answers question two. Use this moment to actually practice what it's like in a live coding interview. And I'll be dropping in to see if you have any questions along the way. Also, feel free to ask any questions along the way if you have them in either Slack or in chat. And best of luck. See you soon. How are you, Courtney?
I'm good, just extra busy. I don't know if you know, but maybe I should stop recording. Things has changed here, so I'll say that.